Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about implementing Twilio into your Ruby on Rails applications for you to do two-way text messaging. Before we jump into the code for Twilio, let's talk about a project and goals here. So let's say we have a business that wants to be able to message people back. Let's say we have a business that wants to be able to message people and allow them to text back. So let's say we are trying to keep track of people that work for us, and periodically we send them questions and get their responses. I'm being rather vague about this because this could apply to dozens of situations. So I've done some prerequisite work ahead of time of this video. So we're going to start our Ruby on Rails app. We're going to start our work on a Ruby on Rails app that has Devise and Sucker Punch installed, along with a few UI-related gems. We'll build on top of the work that previous developers have already done for us and add the text messaging functionality on top of it. You'll be able to fork this app at the current place where I'm starting from with Devise installed. In the links below, there's a link to a post that has all the links you need for that. Just check that out. So the game plan here is to add all of the related code and send the text messaging in the background jobs. As far as the user is concerned, they just type in a message and then it'll send it off. The plan is to just let the app send messages and then handle the replies, and we won't do anything fancy like notifications. That's something that we can cover later if needed. So there's a few things first to get started, and I'll jump into that in just a moment. To get started, you're going to need a Twilio account, and you'll need your account SID and primary auth token. You can find these on the Twilio console. To get started, you'll need a Twilio account and need your account SID and primary auth tokens. You can find those on the Twilio console. In addition, we'll be leveraging a messaging service from Twilio, so we will need to create a messaging service in the Twilio console. So I'm in the Twilio console right now, and I've got a sub-accounts for keeping track of things, which is pretty awesome that Twilio has this thing. So we're going to go and create a messaging service right now. And we will go to messaging services, and we'll create a new one. And we're going to call this one two-way messaging. Perfect. And there's our service ID. We will edit these inbound settings later, but for now that's fine. And let's go to numbers. We'll buy a number because we need to do that. And my area code here is 205. Now I just need SMS for now, but if you want to do, yeah, we'll buy this one. This one looks like a good one. Great, and it can do everything, so perfect. So I bought a phone number, and I'm going to add a number. Oh wait, okay, cool. So when you buy a number, it gets added to it. So that number is now on your service, and that's one of those things you needed. So once you create a messaging service, you need to grab the messaging service SID, which we have here. We can get that. It's under the service ID. And we'll be putting these into the Rails secrets YML file. If you'd prefer, you can use an environmental variable, but I'll be using the secrets YML file. So you can read more about the messaging services on Twilio's documentation. The links for that is in the description. Quick side note, if you're using the secrets YML file, please make sure you add it to your gitignore file, like so, and add and commit that to your repository. You want to avoid your config secrets YML and database YML from getting into your repos. When you're ready and you've configured your secrets YML file, it'll look something like something similar to it. Don't worry, these aren't my actual keys. I'm going to do that off camera, but yours should look pretty similar to this. Whereas Twilio messaging service is that messaging service ID we see here, which actually I can do that right now. So we'll edit this. But I'll edit my account SID and my Twilio token off screen. But this Twilio token is referring to your primary auth key, which is, here, that auth token right there. So once that's done, be sure to restart your Rails application. But actually, you should maybe wait until we add the gem. So 1 moment. Great. So I've edited my secrets YML file, and now I'm going to install the Twilio under -ruby gem, and I'm going to specify a gem version of 4.11.1. Great. So we've added Twilio. We'll comment this out into our code. And then we'll go to our terminal and run bundle install. Be sure when you run bundle install that you restart your Rails server. So I'll go over here and stop that. Let that run. It's installed Twilio Ruby. And we'll restart our Rails server. All right, before we move further with the Twilio work, let's take a moment to set up our project. Since we're building a two-way messaging system, I want to keep track of who I'm sending messages to and from. So I'm going to use a person model to represent who we're sending messages to or receiving them from. So almost like a contact of sorts. So let's go ahead and jump into the console here, or the terminal, and generate a scaffold for person. And it'll have a name which is going to be a string, a phone, which is also going to be a string, and it'll be referenced to a user. So it'll be user references, and that'll create the proper indexes on the database for us. Oh, and it'll also let us clean up this mess of stuff we've got. So we're going to also generate a model for a conversation, which will contain references to a person and a user. So I'm using conversations to tie together people and users, as well as messages will also messages will belong to a conversation later on. So let's go jump over here to our app, and we're going to go to the assets, style sheets, scaffolds file, and I'm just gonna delete that right now because it'll mess with the CSS. And then I'm going to rake db migrate. All right, so let's jump into the models person, and I'm going to create a has one conversation association here, and then a conversation will belong to a person, and it belongs to a user. A user can has many conversations. Those are our associations there. In the person file, we're going to do an after create callback, and we'll have a method called conversation, and we'll create that create conversation method here. Be sure to end it, and it'll be a conversation dot find or create by person, or it'll be and user is going to be self.user. Because a person belongs to a user, we'll just get the user ID that the conversation should be created for on the person. May not be entirely necessary to have a user here, but that's the way I'll be doing it. So that looks good there. Now let's go to our controllers, our people controller, and we'll add a before action of authenticate user. Spelling can be hard. And one more thing is on this create action, we're going to change this to current underscore user people dot build person params, and this will create the association. This will automatically give a user on the person record. Great. So let's go check out our app and see what's, oh, right. One more thing. We need to go to our views, layouts, header, and let's link to the people path. Is that what it is? I didn't actually rake routes and look at that. People path. Cool. So there is our scaffold. We can also remove the user from the form as well, but we'll just leave it blank. Should be fine. And if we create a phone number of 000, we'll create it. No undefined method people for user. Let's go check out our user model here. Oh, right. Has many people. That association is also important. And here is our person. It got the user, and that's good. Jumping over to the routes file, we're going to add our routes here for the application. So we'll go to resources, conversations, but we only want the index action, and it's going to be a block because we're going to nest our resources for the messages here. And we're going to do a model of conversations, but only on the index and create action. So this is going to allow us to nest messages under the conversations controllers, and as well as we need a webhook for Twilio to post to. So we'll go do a post of conversations messages / reply, and we'll route that to the conversations / messages, and then an action of reply, and that's a Twilio webhook for inbound message. So let's go and jump ahead to create the controllers. We're going to do Rails. We'll clear that. Rails G controller, conversations, and we need an index view. Rails G controller conversations, and then we'll do a messages, and we also need an index there, and that'll create the files we need. All right. So when we send messages to, also one more thing, let's pop back to our routes file, and we will clean up the routes it auto generates. And let's just confirm everything's still working with the app. Great. And let's pop over to our header, and we'll go ahead and route this to the conversations path, and that should be lowercase. Great. And here's our conversations index. Here I'm going to generate a model for the message that has a field of to, from, status, body, message SID, account SID, messaging service SID, the direction, a user reference, and a conversation reference. So this is basically all of the parameters that Twilio either needs to send a message or is going to pass to us when we receive an inbound message on the number. These are all the fields I'm worried about keeping. I go into it a little bit more in the text version of this document. Check that out. Links are obviously in the description. But for that, we'll just generate our model here. And then, of course, run our rake db migrates, run our migrations. Great. And as always, we need to jump back into the code here before we get into stuff. I've added the conversations path here to the header. We should be done there. We are done in our routes. We're done in there. All right, so let's jump into our conversations controller, where we add the before action authenticate _user, which is a devised method to ensure that users are logged in. And we will also add that in the messages controller here. We're adding that obviously because we don't want people who aren't logged into the site to be able to send a message or read messages. So let's go to our conversations controller, and here is where in the index action we'll create an @conversations instance variable, which will list all of the current user conversations, and it'll include the person in the record, which helps prevent an N1 query. So that looks good there. Let's go to our app layout views, conversations, index controller, and we'll edit this to say we'll have an H1 tag of conversations, and then we will just render conversations. That's all we need there in the index. And we will create a partial, because when we call render conversations, it looks for a partial of conversation, html.erb. And here we'll have a div class of conversation. And we'll say the person, and we'll say it was conversation person.name. And then we'll, of course, link to the conversation messages. And it'll be conversation messages path, and we'll pass in the conversation. And we'll add a BR tag. And then, of course, we'll separate them within a nice HR tag. All right, so now if we come back to our conversation index and we refresh, we get a broken link. Nil is not an active model compatible object. It must implement to partial path. Let's make sure I've done something right. Conversation. Render conversations. Conversations controller @conversations. Oh, that needs to be plural. There we go. And we're linking to the messages. Now this is going to list this page will list all of the messages for that particular conversation. So this is for the conversation for Andrew. All right. Jumping to our app controllers conversations messages _controller, we will go ahead and start stubbing out the controller here. I've added a before action of set conversation except on the reply action, which is a pretty standard action you'll see in most Rails apps, which is just setting the conversation based on the conversation ID, which is passed in, which will be this ID in the URL here. So for this conversation, the conversation ID is 1. It's the only one we have, and it is our first one. So now let's go to the index. So just a little bit of the app real quick. This index will list all of the messages as well as a form at the bottom for people to type a text message to send. I'm going to treat this as a basic CRUD app right now, which is just, not really a CRUD app, but you'll be able to create and, of course, read the message here. And then we'll add in the actual messaging functionality in a moment once the form is working, because it does ironically cost $1 or a cent to send the text message. So we're going to create a variable called messages here, which will contain all the messages, and it'll be conversation.messages. Order is going to be created at ascending, and that'll just list all of the messages, and then we'll create a message instance variable here, and that'll be a conversation messages.build. One more thing, we need to go and update the associations. So a conversation should has many messages, and that'll allow the conversation.messages that we just used in the messages controller here. All right, let's go and update our messages. Let's go update our conversations messages index partial. All right, so we're gonna have, we'll just delete these. We'll have an H1 of messages with, and we'll reference the at conversation person name. So it'll be messages with Andrew in my case. We'll have a div with an ID of messages. And then here we are going to render at messages. And then we're going to have a form below it, but let's go create this message partial here. So we'll create an underscore message.html.erb. Bear with me, this is going to be a little typing, so I'm going to jump forward and then I'll explain it in a moment. Alright, so each message is going to be in its own div with a clear fix and a message ID partial, as well as we're going to give each an alert, and based on if the message from is filled out, then they'll have a message inbounds CSS class suffix to it, or if it's from if it's not filled out, then it'll be a message outbounds. So that's just relating to how it looks. I wanted outbound messages to be green and inbound messages to be blue. Just more of a CSS. Then we display the message.body and a local time variable. Local time is installed here to make the times look good, and it'll just tell you what time has been sent if the status is sent. Relatively simple, but that's for each message that'll be displayed. I've created the form here for the message variable, and it'll post to the conversation messages path, and it's just accepting a body for them to send. So let's go check it out. And here we have just our form here. We don't have any messages, and our create action will break. Yep. So our create action did break. So let's go take care of our create action. All right, so we'll create an at message instance variable here that's very similar to the one that's up in the new messages.build, but this time we'll pass in message params, which is a method we haven't created yet. So let's go do that here. Define message params, and that will be params that require message, and we're only going to permit the body. We're going to assume some things, which we'll set up here. We'll go message.updates, and we're going to update the to field because right now we're only getting a body from them, and that'll go to the conversation person phone. Then we'll update the status to pending. The direction will be outbound API, and that's all we need to do there. So now we can do the standard if at message.save, then we'll redirect to the conversations messages path at conversation, and just say notice of like message sent, else we're gonna just error out because we'll just error out here to the conversations, and that will be an alert, something went wrong, and that's it. So in a moment we're going to send SMS and job here. So we'll replace this line in a moment with our job here. But for now, this is how we're doing it. So the message is going to be stored in this instance variable. We then update the fields like the to number, because you don't want to have to enter somebody's phone number in every time when you're obviously on a list. Obviously, the app knows, Andrew's phone number. So we're going to say, hello, man. We'll say since. If I've done everything right, it'll break. Let's see. I pluralized conversations. and it should be conversation messages path. That's where I went wrong. Yes, and then duplicated it twice. So there we go. We've got a basic CRUD action for our sending messages. I'm not sure why that took me 20 minutes to explain. Okay, so we have this app that's basically has conversations that we have messages within, and we can create messages, but let's actually send text messages. How do we do that? That's the whole point, right? So let's go to our app models, and we're going to create a new file, and we'll call it sms.rb. Now, I'm going to paste in some code and walk you through it. So when you initialize this SMS class, you're going to pass in a phone number. You'll call it sms.new with a phone number, and then you pass a send method and send the body. And what this is doing is contacting Twilio and passing in your account SID and your Twilio token. And when you call the send method, it's calling the client account messages create, which is basically telling Twilio, hey, send a text message to this phone number that we passed in when we created the class, and it's sending the body. Again, if you've not updated your secrets YML file and you're creating this, you want to make sure you update it. Or if you use environmental variables, just update these secrets on this. So once we create that SMS class, then we're going to jump over to our console here and we'll run Rails G job send SMS. Once that's done, we'll go and edit that file it just generated for us. And under the perform method, we're going to pass in a message. We're going to send that SMS using that SMS class we just created, which is going to be message.to. And we'll call a send method with message.body. Then we'll update the message column LUMNS with the status of sent. So this will send the message to the phone number too, and then it'll send the body, of course, and then it will update the status to sent, so we can display that in our application views. So let's jump over to our messages controller, and where we stub that out, we'll call the send SMS job perform later, since we don't want it running inline, and we'll pass in that message that's being created, but only if it's saved. Okay, so now we need to now this will send a text message to our phone number. I'm going to cut off screen, make sure I've got everything going, and then I'll be back and we'll test it out. All right, we're back. I am going to go back to our Rails app here, and while I was off screen, I made sure everything was configured correctly. I've actually updated my phone number in this app, so when I text hello Rod from the screencast, we should get that. It says message sent. It will have scheduled that background job. And we have a new message come through. I'm going to just check on my cell phone here. And I do have the text message. So there you see it was read and went away. And we can look in here. And here is our send SMS job. I'm going to have to blur out the phone number too there. So some of that will be, blurred out, but it did queue up the SMS job, and then it did send the job. Perfect. Now that we have outgoing messages working, the next step is going to be making incoming messages work. So in order to get this to work, you're going to need some additional software to allow you to expose your your web server, your development server to the outside world. I like to use localtunnel.me to for this, but you can use something else like ngrok. But for me, because I've already installed it with it, I'm gonna just jump over to my console here, and we'll do localtunnel-s, and we'll specify my subdomain here. Then we'll pass in a port and call it 3000, and it'll tell me that my URL is my subdomain here .localtunnel.me, and we'll copy that and paste it. Now, with my network set up at the current location, and here we have our web server exposed to the world here. So if you were on right now while I was doing this, you could see my server here. Here we have it, and we'll say conversations, and this is this, and then I can say hi, and there we have. It'll send it. It'll enqueue it. And as you can tell, it works just the same. And there is our message on my watch. The badge did not show up, but nevertheless. So now that we have our server exposed, we need to update the Twilio console under our messages service. Underneath here, we'll go to our messaging service we created, and we need to make sure on inbound settings it says process inbound messages. That make sure that's checked, and then under request URL, we need to update this to be our HTTPS, my subdomain here, localtunnel.me/conversations messages reply. Ensure that it's an HTTP post request. There's the notification from Twilio. My Mac was rather slow, and it said it created a new SMS service, but apparently their console, which is a beta, has a few bugs. So once that's done, we can now post to our app, but we need to go to our conversation messages controller and build out this reply app, because right now we could send something to it and it would just break. For example, let me go to our console here, and let me pull up my phone on the side here, and I'll just send hello. I'll send hello. This will break. I just replied with my phone there, and as you can tell, instantly we got a whole bunch of breaking here. But that's okay, because we see all these parameters that Twilio has passed into us. It's passing in all this information. It received a from here. There's a from phone number somewhere on here. From number here. But it added a +1. We're going to fix that in a bit, because that's how it is. Great. So let's go build out this reply action. I'm going to actually grab that code that I wrote earlier, and I'll bring it in, and then we'll explain it. Great. So I've copied that in, and here we see I'm setting up a bunch of variables from Twilio that just so I can reference these better than params from. On this from variable, I am gsubbing out the +1. That's what this does here, and I'm just replacing it with nothing. So that allows me not to have to put +1 on the phone numbers. I'm assigning body, status, direction, and a message ID to all friendly variable names. And here is where it gets interesting, because I'm looking up a person based on the phone number where it matches closer to. And then I look up that conversation based on the person. Through that conversation, I build a message with all of the params of it, and then I save it, and then I just return an OK to Twilio so that our console just doesn't show up a bunch of errors, and Twilio doesn't expect much from there. Before we can do anything else, we need to go and edit our before actions, and we're gonna just except on the reply, we won't authenticate users. And then one more thing is we need to skip before action verify authenticity token, but only on the reply action. And that's just the token for from Rails. That's a method to help prevent that, just because it's only on the post thing. So now if I send a text message with any luck, no break, we see it's committed. There's the message come in. It's looking up my phone number, and it completed. So let's go check out our conversation here. We'll just refresh the page. And here we see that's what I sent. Hooray! I'll send. I sent. I refresh. Nothing happened. I refresh again. Nothing happened. What broke? Let's go back and look. Sometimes Twilio can be rather slow. Let me check my local tunnel is still running. Testing. There's my testing one. I don't know what happened in my hooray, but I'm sure it will come through. Sometimes it takes a few moments for it to come through. Yeah, okay. Whoops. Okay, that was cool. I didn't know that it could do that. It'll come through. I mean, 2 out of 3 worked, right? So there we have it. That is two-way messaging with Twilio. I hope that helped. Basically, the important bit of information is this reply webhook is handling all of the inbound messages for our application. And yeah, the reply is handling the inbound. Our background job here is sending the messages in the background. I abstracted it out to that SMS class just for the situation where if I ever need to switch out from Twilio to another service, I can do it there. But yeah, hope that helped. Let me know what you thought in the comments below on YouTube. Or you can always shoot me an email. My email has been up at the top of the screen when I've logged in here. You can find that here. Shoot me an email. I'd love to get together. I'm also exploring opportunities as a junior developer. So if you've got fields open there, hit me up. I'd love to chat about it. So thanks for watching, everybody, and I will see you next time. Oh, there's my hooray. Okay, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.